Today we would like to show you an approach how you capture, mine, and monitor ETL and batch job process data. Please note that we record the online session and ask your questions in the chat, please. We will answer them at the end of the session. With that, I would like to hand over to Matthias. The stage is yours.
Thanks, Alec, for introduction. If we talk about ETL or batch job processes, then we have to talk about what is a process. That's why I have a definition here. Process is a series of interrelated tasks that culminate in the provision of a service or a product to a customer. And on the right side, we see some examples, what kind of processes we are talking here about. From the IT area, we talk about nightly batch jobs, extract, load, transform processes, DevSecOps pipelines, ITSM processes, and such things. And what clients need to know about their processes? They need to know about the process, the state, and the metrics to understand the process that are running actually, and how they can optimize the processes. They need error transparency, because if an error occurred in a process, then you have to detect it, and you need a transparency about it, and then in most cases you try to reduce the failure to reduce the error cost. And you need process data for post-processing or for reporting and similar things. And process visualization helps to get transparency between different stakeholders in your company, and it's very management compliant. That helps a lot to talk about processes. How we can data gathering and process mining in Versio. We have data sources you found on an operating system level. You have databases, you have REST APIs, you have log files. And in most cases, we use curl operating curl commands or SQL statements to gather this data, and we send this data to Versio. And in Versio, we can then store records. Here we see some records for one process instance, and you see the instance has every time the same ID. They have different UTCs. UTC is a timestamp, and we see the status of the process. And we can send, for example, custom specific values like an amount or a total number of, and something like that. And the most important thing is that Versio helps us to take over this data and to historize the data. Historization is the most important thing to mining this process. And mining means that we can analyze the process if the process is finished, and we can generate a visualization of the process, and we can use support with process data, with process KPI. We can data mine process variants and something like that. Yeah, that is the approach. That means we need two things. We have to take over data from a process, and we need to configure a process mining. And that's very easy in Versio. We can set up in 10 or 15 minutes, and it's not has so much effort like a lot of business process mining tools that you know in the market. Here is an example how we can take over data from an SQL database. The example based on the travel expense process, and it's very simple to take over the data from a database because we have a generic database content importer in Versio, and so you have to define an SQL statement, and what you get in Versio is a change history. That means here you let run this script in a scheduled form, and that means you get in Versio a change history. You see here a core template from the initial gathering process, and you can see here the changing values, and you can see here that only the status of the process changed. And we need this data for process mining. That's very important. Yeah. Another example, if you have no database, you have a, for example, backup script or something like that, then you can use curl. For example, curl you have available on each system, operating system, or network devices, or network attached storage, and something like that. Everywhere you have support for curl, and you can use curl to make a request to Versio. Here's an example in the button. And the most important point here is that we send two information: the name of the step, the process step, and the status. Status can be start and fail, for example. Yeah? And we see here history again. That means this curl represent this change because the process state will be end. That means we see here that the process activity will be end. And so we have here the time slot between the starting point and the end point, and based on this, the process mining can work. Sometimes it's easier if we have a kind of wizard that we support here in Versio. That means you can put here your metadata of your process inside the wizard, and here we provide you ready to run script for Linux and for Windows operating systems. Yeah, that makes sometimes easier for you to start. That means you can start with a empty template, and then you can put your activities inside the script, for example. In the end, we get process monitoring, and the process monitoring gives you insight about the master process. The master process is a consolidated view of all executed process instances. That means you have 1,000 instances, then we calculate here the master process that you can see here on the right side. The process visualization, the visualization of the process flow depending on the selection master, variants, and instances. The next thing is that you can see the current running instances, and here we see the process variants. What are process variants? Process variants are consolidated view of all process instances with the same execution characteristics. What is a characteristic? The characteristic is, for example, as a sequence of action in a process. Or we see here that we can use swim lane. Yeah, and if the swim lane is changing, then you can say, okay, then it's a new variant of the process. And so we get an information, what is my standard process, what I expect, but how the process is working in real life. That I can see here in this variance. And for each variance, I can see the process instances. This means every single process instance with statistics here on the right bottom side. Yeah. Okay, let's go over to a short live demo. I will give you an insight how we collecting process data, how we configure the process mining, how looks the process monitoring, and how easy it is to make a verification of the state of the process data. Therefore, I go to Versio. I use here Versio SAS. We have here our production environment. And at first, I will give you an insight how we can import data. For the import data, we use our one importer. It's an agent, and with this agent, we have the possibility to use our data content importer. That means we are able to take over data from a database. And you can define here an SQL statement to detect all process relevant data. And that's it. You can schedule it. You can see it here. You can schedule it. We do it here for every 15 minutes. And we take over the data from the database. So easy it is for database content. Another example here on a shell level, that means we have here in script that we execute for our data hub pipeline. The data hub pipeline runs approximately 2 or 3 hours, and there are a lot of steps, and I give you an insight here. And here we have a one-liner, and this one-liner send the process information to Versio. Yeah, that's very easy to take your current scripts, and you can expand your scripts with Versio batch job monitoring functionality. And you can here set up standard values for which action I'd start, and you can add, for example, very specific, custom specific values, amount, number of total, blah, 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 memory size, storage volume size, or something like that. Yeah, it's very easy. And if I execute this REST call, then I get data in Versio. Let's see how the data look like. Here we have data for our end of life and security pipeline process monitoring, where we detect new versions of products or security vulnerabilities. And we have here every day 3 instances that we have running. And let's have a look in one process instance. We see here in the top, the final state. This is a milestone, and the milestone name is finish AOL sec data hub pipeline. And in the bottom, we see every change that we have here in the running process of this process instance. Let's start with the final step. That means 22 hours ago, the process starts, and then you can see that in the next step, 2 things change. The step type go to start, and the process step go to pre-check. And in the next step, only the end will change, because pre-check, it's the same process step. Yeah, and in Versio, you have every time to see all data on this level. That means you can see, like here in the initial state, all data, but it's not so interesting. That's why we have here the super filter, and we see only the attributes that are changing. And so we have an easy data hub for all process instance data. So I go on the top, and in the top I can see an event here on this change. Why? Because we detected that is the final milestone of our data hub, and we have create an event that if this condition is valid, fire an event. And this event we have here described in detail. And this event we can push, for example, in Microsoft Teams. That helps our team to see, okay, the data hub process is finished in a state of failed, or in failed of it's ready for updating. Yeah. Okay, and this data we use for process mining. Yeah, and if I go to our business process job monitoring, then I have here 2 examples. I go to the Lifecycle and Security Data Hub pipeline, and we can see here at first the master process. We see here that we have 166 instances that we detected here with Versio. We see here on the right side the process, and this process picture based on the mined process data. And we can see here the master process. That means it's a picture that shows us an aggregation of all processes that we have detected here in Versio.io. And then we have here process variants. Process variants are grouped by specific characteristics. Let's see how it works. Here we have our standard process. We are happy if the process every day works in this kind of manner. And here we have, for example, a failed process. So we can see here the master process, and on the top or colored, we see how this process instance are running in real life. And we can see here that this activity failed. Yeah. That means we have here the process step, and this process step fails. And if a process fails, then we can verify this state and can send an event and an alert outside Versio. For every grouping, for the master, for the variance, or for the specific instance, every time we get here our process data. Yeah, that means currently I have a single process instance selected. That's we get the execution time and the elapsed time of the process. And you can, for example, filter it to say, okay, which of this process need a long time for running. And we can see here that our CVE load raw CVE from Red Hat need a longer time. Why ever? Yeah, it's not a topic like here. That means you have all data available about the process, execution time, KPIs, elapsed time. You can include custom values here. You are free to put everything in. And we support swim lane. Swim lane is the operating unit where the data is processed that you can use too. And this helps you to bring in process monitoring for batch jobs, for ETL, for pipelines in minutes, because you only need to take over the data, and curl and SQL are the best way to bring in the data here. And you have to define the process mining that I show you in a minute. And then you get this kind of information about your process. That means the process variance or processes. You get the data and the statistics about the process and the visualization of the process. And the last thing that I will show you is the configuration of the process mining. It's very simple. You have to find which entity of data you want to mine. You have to, you can customize the attribute where the step is defined. And the most important point is that you say, what is the last step or the last process step in your process. That means the process mining knows then that he can calculate the variance and something like that. Yeah. All others are optional. That's you need 3 attributes to define this process mining very easily. And here we have the batch job script generator. I show you in the slides here. I show you it again. And that's all. That's all for today. Yeah, take over your data, define here your process mining, and you get real and nice monitoring of your processes. Here we see another example. This example shows, for example, our backups that run every night. And you can see that it's not every time the same process, yeah, that can change, and that will be represented by this variance. So that's for all from the live demo. And now, Alex, you have the last word for today.
Yes. Thanks, Matthias, for the introduction and for the live demo. Before we answer your questions, I would like to just summarize what Matthias has just said in 3 main bullet points. First is setting up process monitoring is very easy and can be done in a short time with standards such as SQL, curl, or REST API. It can be implemented in any customer environment, and customer-specific process data can be integrated at any time. Second, Versio delivers high-quality standards and customized processes data with process mining. Mentioned here, very important, once again, are process master, process variants, and process instances, for which there's aggregated process data at every level. Third, take back control of your processes. And you can achieve this through transparency and objectivity on the basis of detailed process data, visualized process flows for better manual understanding, and events and alerts for faulty process runs, for example. This should it be for today.